Peace and good evening, everyone. Staff, colleagues, teachers, students, media, naysayers. I'm sure some of you are out there as well. Let's be honest, they are out there as well. We're going to change their minds here at Newark Public Schools. But I'm enthused to be here with you all today. I am Dr. Sekou Sankofa, the proud superintendent of Newark Public Schools. I've been a resident in Newark for approximately a year now, and I trust that the future is going to be bright. And I say that because Newark has a very interesting can-do spirit that I cannot ignore. The nature of this meeting is because of a harsh reality. That harsh reality is school closings. All right, school closings. All right. However, know and understand that myself and my administrative team, we are going to choke this harsh reality with innovation as well as optimism. All right. And when you all receive this presentation, I want you to keep in mind my optimistic lens. And my optimistic lens is very simple. It is as follows. All I have is you. All you have is me. And all we have is we in regards to the educational community. Moving forward. So we know that our school district consists of 66 schools. Out of that 66, there are 35,329 students. In the primary level, 15,412. Middle school, 9,404. High school, 7,785. And special needs students are 2,728. Two of our biggest concerns within our school district is graduation rate. Students are graduating at 69%. And chronic absenteeism is also a lingering issue where students from 9 through 12 are absent 48% of the times, whereas in K through 8 is 23% of the times. Now, people can look at data, then compose a narrative. However, let's keep in mind, these are children, all right? They're not held responsible for themselves at all levels. Adults are involved, or need to be involved. Simultaneously, when we look at our students, we have to keep in mind that they are surrounded by a very unique environment because Newark has challenges that a lot of cities have, but theirs is unique because they have such a small population of people. Newark consists of a consistently 270,000 people. Last year, there were 100 murders, 100 rapes, close to 100. Robberies was 1,334. Aggravated assault was 1,104. Burglaries was 1,138. And motor vehicle thefts. Motor vehicle thefts were 2,122. Now, I pronounce that last data with emotion because growing up in Pittsburgh Public Schools, I remember the movie New Jersey Drive, all right? New Jersey Drive was basically chronicling the car theft issue in Newark. And it was always interesting looking at this as a young man. And here we are, score of years later, and they're still having the issue. When I speak about my team and I using innovation, it's something like this. If students or youth are stealing cars at a tremendous rate, let's reframe their focus and put them in programs where they can learn how to fix cars, participate in racing cars, create a stadium where they can actually race something. But we have to do something. When we see that students are looking one way, we must reframe that picture so it can be something that we can glorify instead of frown upon. Also in the 80s, Newark, like many black cities across America, suffered tragically regarding crack cocaine being strategically implemented into the urban area. Now, here's the detail with this. In the 80s, because of crack, it was considered a law enforcement issue. Now, in 2017, flirting with 2018, opioid use or abuse by white individuals is called a public health issue. All right. So we're going to make sure that we're being very transparent as leaders here. We're going to be looking at how race has an effect on our school districts as well. Because clearly, when you see this, how they're calling it an issue for the law then and now a public health issue, anyone can see that that's clearly racism. So school closings. We're going to be closing some schools due to budget strains. It was forecasted that we're supposed to be closing 5 schools. I'll speak on that later. But what exactly is school closing? We know that schools close, but my team and I realized that when schools close, cultural institutions of the community are destroyed. Um, and that's a problem. We can't close a lot of schools because these schools mean something to people. And exercising humanity, I understand this because my high school closed 5 years later after I graduated, and now they're condos in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So we're not going to be taking that approach when we do close schools. Um, and again, we are going to choke this reality with optimism as well as innovation. And I say it to say we're just not going to close 5 schools. What we're going to do is, let me get back with you on that. I'll share that in a minute. But ultimately, the metrics we use for deciding what schools are closed, we looked at the elementary, middle school, and high schools. In those schools, they house 16,647 African Americans, 15,672 Latinas, and 2,758 white students. The metrics we used were academic performance, absenteeism rate, building funds per school, and lastly, school proximity. Absenteeism in 2015-2016, only 44% of our students were present 95% of the school days or more. That is an issue we have to address. 30% of those students were absent more than 10% of the school days. And in pre-K, 44% of the students had chronic absenteeism, whereas in the 12th grade, 59% had chronic absenteeism rate. And those were the highest amounts of students that were absent. Now, I want you to look at this, what we're really dealing with here. When students come into pre-K, they're chronically absent. When they leave high school in the 2015-2016 year, they were chronically absent. So the question has to be asked, when is instruction taking place, or how is it positively affecting the students if they're chronically absent going into our school district and then leaving our school district? All right. I mentioned already that graduation rate is at 69%, and our assessments are at 28.4%, meaning those students who are meeting or exceeding expectations. That, in compared to the chronic absenteeism, does make sense, but we have to make it right. All right. So while my team and I look at these metrics with a fine tooth, the most significant factor was the low enrollment. All right. So the 2 schools with the lowest enrollment that we will be closing are New Leadership Academy as well as Fast Track Success High School. Both of those schools combined for $5 million, but they have very few seats being filled. Now, when I say close them, I want that to be asterisk. We're going to close the schools. However, we are going to repurpose them and make them into community schools. All right. Now, what is a community school, Dr. Sankofa? A community school serves as an educational institution and a center of community life. All right. Our community schools are going to be like magnets to our men, women, and children in the community, meaning that it's going to attract them. And when I say that, it's because we are going to have Saturday schools, adult education, workshops, professional development for daycares in the neighborhood. And the latter is very important. These students are coming into our district disadvantaged. So we are going to reframe that as well. And we're going to bring the daycares into our schools, the daycare administrators into our school, train them effectively so students can have a more fluid exchange leaving daycares and going to pre-K. All right. So that's the type of innovation I'm speaking on. Additionally, we're going to be creating partnerships with some of our biggest industries, which are banking, some of the colleges, as well as insurance. So we're going to create those partnerships, get some funding in those schools so that we can make sure that there is a cooperation taking place. All right. And the cooperation is going to be taking place amongst parents, community, as well as school. It's going to be a triangulation, and the triangulation is going to be pivoted into the professional communities who are going to help us fund this project. All right. So with that being said, I have a great team of leaders here who are going to help implement, and they are going to share finer details of how this is going to take place. All right. So we have our Chief Academic Officer, Andrea St. John. She is going to give you some fine fingerprint details regarding how we are going to maintain student outcomes as these 2 schools close. Our Deputy Superintendent Officer, Dr. Barbara Bocci, she is going to, pardon me, she is going to provide other details regarding transportation, facilities, finance, and the well-being of teachers and students who are going to be affected by the school closings. And then we have our Chief Family and Community Executive Officer, Denver Baptiste, who is going to be talking about the well-being of, he's interested in the well-being of everyone. I meant to say that. And he's going to share how we're going to support families during the close. So without further ado, our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Andrea St. John. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the Newark City Public Schools Board of Education. My name is Andrea St. John, and I'm the Chief Academic Officer for the school system. And I'm here to joining you remotely to let you know about the plans that I have for the two schools that we're planning on closing and the community school that we're planning on opening as a part of our plan to reduce the budget for year 2017, 2018. The plan that we came up with was based on enrollment numbers of the schools and looking at closely which schools we would plan to close because of low enrollment of students. And this is mainly enrollment and attendance. So basically the two schools that we were looking at to close are New Leadership Academy, which has an annual budget of $2.6 million, and Fast Track High School, which has an annual budget of $2.8 million. The reason that we chose these two schools is because of the low enrollment of both high schools and the fact that there were other schools in the school system which could also offer the same programming. So New Leadership Academy, definitely has had a high absenteeism rate for the previous school year. And the focus of the school is to provide CTE, which is career technology programming for students. There are other programs in the city that also offer CTE programming that's not too far from New Leadership Academy. And that was one of the things that we considered, that their education as far as learning career technology coursework would not be interrupted. So the two schools that we found that offer the same sort of instruction were the Newark Vocational High School, and that would be the regular CTE program that they were already experiencing could definitely be something that the students the 82 students who are currently enrolled at the school could easily be absorbed into that program. So we would recommend that to make sure that their program is not interrupted at all, and they could continue with the same sort of internships and instruction that was offered to them at New Leadership Academy. The other school that we know we need to close is Fast Track Success High School. And this is a little bit of a different case where it still had low enrollment, 107 students, but it also had a high absentee rate. The purpose of this high school was to make sure that students were finishing their coursework and requirements to graduate on time with wraparound support and help from additional clinicians and social workers to make sure that they stayed on track and did weekly check-ins and all these wonderful interventions. I'll call it interventions. Interventions to make sure that they reached their academic goals and met the requirements for graduation. But what we found is that, with the low enrollment, these same services could be offered at different schools and that were close by. We looked at two schools that were close by that have a better track record of working with students who are in that same population. And we recommend that this school would be broken up into, or not broken up, but students would be redirected to have a choice between two schools, and that would be Science Park High School or or American History High School or Central High School. And with the choice of these three comprehensive high schools, students should be able to find the program that, or the comprehensive programming that fits their needs academically. But also, we are committed to making sure that the counseling support that they had at those other schools to move them through their academic plans, that they would actually follow the group of the students. So if it's 107 students and they had 3 counselors or 4 counselors that served them well, then we would try to make sure that the proportionate number of students who chose to go to either American Central or the New Science Project School would definitely be a part of that redirection. We would also make sure that families knew that they had a choice, and if there were other considerations that needed to be made, that we would, our office would definitely work with their students to make sure that that is accomplished. For the closed schools that we proposed, we definitely wanted to use that space to become community centers and community schools for instruction, for community use. So basically, for parents seeking to get adult literacy instruction, for students to receive after school or for nonprofit organizations to rent space in that building so that it could be used to work with the organizations that are partnered with some of our programs within Newark City Public Schools. We also were looking at making the Fast Track Success School be our Newark City Public School Curriculum Training Center for leadership training as well as teacher continuing education training, so that we are using the space wisely and using the space for academic continued instruction of our teachers and of our leaders, and developing a continuing education program so that teachers can continue to work on their certifications and learn more strategies for teaching the students that they do have. The other thing that we wanted to do was bolster adult learning and adult literacy. So that center would be best suited at literacy courses, technical training, high school diploma coursework for adults looking to re-enter, and for students who are still within the age to continue their education, but possibly need to make other choices with their high school learning. So we are looking to do partnerships with foundations as far as using other areas of the buildings so that they can, the ones who are serving our students with literacy and wraparound services such as, full day or full tutoring programs and full day assistance for some of our students who are experiencing poverty, that they can have wraparound services at these community schools to support to support adult learners, people who are over 18 still seeking to get their high school diploma, as well as students who are just they have to have an alternative path in order to finish their high school education. The other thing that we wanted to make sure that we do is partner with the city of Newark to take over general maintenance of the building, and possibly rent out space to them for the the use of the building, and through these adult literacy programmings. So now, the partnership that I previously mentioned with the city of Newark is something that we definitely need to work on. The superintendent and I will be working on within the next 3 months to work with the mayor to come up with a plan for which city offices he would, would be best suited to be at our city, a community school, so that they could serve more students and more of our adult learners within the city. And, something that definitely doesn't have to happen overnight, but we definitely would like to repurpose those buildings that are being closed, so the students can be redirected to other high schools in a way that would benefit our teachers and our other stakeholders in a more inclusive and productive way, so that we are not just operating in a silo, but we are working with other initiatives within the city that might have the same objective as us. So we just were really interested in partnerships that have to do with academic enhancement of students and help them reaching their goals together. So the students who will be redirected, definitely we have a plan for them, and we want to make sure that we support their parents and we give their parents the options that we've come up with. If their parents really would like to explore other options, we're definitely open to that as well on a case-by-case basis. But we definitely wanted to make sure that our decision would impact less students educational interruption as possible, and that we made the decision on which schools to close based off of something that, a criterion that was less, that had more to do with enrollment or attendance data than any other factor. So we want to make sure that our schools are serving students well and that we are using all the resources that we have. I wanted to take this time to introduce to you our COO, Miss Barbara Boecki, so that she could tell you, what's her plan for making sure that students get to school and have a smooth transition, and that we work on creating these community schools together as a cabinet of chiefs who support our superintendent. Thank you very much, and I hope that you enjoyed my presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. St. John, for that introduction. I know that Dr. Sankofa and Dr. St. John have already started you on the path to understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it. And now I'm going to come and talk to you about the reasons or what this meeting is all about from an operational standpoint. First, I'd like to once again talk about the new plan for Newark. We know that the community desires to have power in implementing its own vision, and it's fair. I think for so long, especially starting with the state takeover and with the One Newark plan, a lot of the decisions were taken away from the community. We finally have community control of our community schools. And so we wanted to make sure that, with that being said, the community is well aware of exactly what we are doing and why we are doing it, and how all of us are streamlining a plan to be able to effectively teach our students with a high quality education, but also remain on budget. So let's talk about 1995 and the things that happened. As you already know, we're going to have to close schools. But I want to give you a little bit of a history lesson as to what happened in 1995 and what we are going to do at this time. In 95, the state took over. And between 1995 and up until fairly recently, multiple schools were closed down in the One Newark plan. And as district schools were closed down, those schools were turned into charter schools. Now, the issue was schools had to be closed. The Newark School District was in a $1.3 billion deficit, and money was not falling from the sky. So something had to be done. However, the issue is that a lot of the schools that were closed were disproportionately in Black neighborhoods. About 90% of the schools that were closed were affected Black children, whereas the district as a whole was not 90% Black and is still not 90% Black. So we took a very big look at what has been done historically and what we want to do. So once again, multiple schools were closed down, and the revenue from those schools was turned over to help start charter schools. And I know that that caused a lot of unrest within the community. Once again, that's why we're going back to the idea that we want community schooling, which has already been mentioned before. So number one, a lot of schools were closed. Upwards above 10 schools were closed within the time of the One Newark plan and state control. The second thing that happened is that students were bused from here to there. Now, the great thing is that the One Newark transportation was created. However, teachers also suffered in this in our past. It usually all of the staff was let go, and teachers were hindered and hurt by this process. They lost their jobs as if they weren't working as hard as they could for the students that they had. So, in this renewal and redistribution and reconstitution and essentially turning over the entire staff, we want to let you know that in this new phase and in this new plan, we will not be doing that to teachers. So, where are we now? Where we are now is the state has reduced our budget by 20%. It's hard. It is horrible. We are living in an austerity environment where a lot of our budgets are made based on austerity measures because we are still recovering from 2008 and 2009. With that being said, we as an administrative staff realized that we needed to shave our budget by 20%, and we're given the directive to close up to 5 schools. 5 schools. That meant countless numbers of children who were going to be misplaced. And we had a hard time. We came up with a few schools and we deliberated about it. And a lot of the reasons that we were going to close these particular schools was based on student attendance, was based on just the number of students, and then student performance. But we realized once again that this was disproportionately affecting our Black and brown students. And it was also disproportionately affecting our special ed students. But one of the ideas that came up was to close one of our flagship special education academies. And what we realized was these are places that students are underrepresented, and we cannot suffer. We cannot have our children suffer because of budget shortings. So what we decided to do this past year, while we were looking at the budget, we actually bid $13.1 million to be able to renovate our administrative building. What we decided as a staff is that instead of renovating our administrative building, we will remain in the building, the alternative building that we have been in. Now, it's not comfortable, but we would rather save children than save ourselves. And so we're going to say, instead of closing the 5 schools that we were tasked to close with, we are no longer going to do our administrative renovation. So that's going to save $13.1 million. We want to continue to let you know that we are about community. So even if it only affects us, that is better than ruining the efforts of the whole community. Now, with these measures, we still have 1 or 2 schools that we're still going to need to close. And so, and we still have a lot of repairs that need to be made. So we actually had a few options on the table, but in order to make sure that the least amount of students are affected, we are going to close 2 schools. And with these 2 school closures, we will only be affecting 189 students out of the total population. And we figured out what we're going to do or where these students are going to go. The first school is New Leadership Academy. And it's, once again, I know we've already said this, it's going to save us $2.6 million. The next school we're going to close, which once again we've already said, is Fast Track Success Academy, which is going to save us $2.8 million. Now, New Leadership Academy has 82 students, and Fast Track Success Academy has 107 students. New Leadership Academy is less than a mile away from our flagship school, Science Park High School, which was newly renovated. And I thank you as a district for backing us to be able to have the bonds to be able to successfully create such a beautiful school that is doing great things. There's a lot of AP and CTE, and the students are doing well. So what we want to do is transfer the students from New Leadership Academy who are on that same track of success and put them into Science Park Academy. Now, I know your question is, does Science Park have space? Yes, it does. Science Park's capacity is 926 students. And right now, it's only got 808 students. So they actually have tons of room to be able to fit in there. And what we're hoping is that the new school, and because they're so close together, the New Leadership Academy students will be taking the same transportation that they used to go to their old school to their new school of Science Park Academy. So that's what we're doing for the 82 students. Fast Track Success Academy, instead of choosing a school for them, we're going to give them the opportunity to choose from 3 schools which are in proximity. Once again, they will also be using the same transportation system. And don't forget that transportation system is called the One Newark Shuttle. Now, because we're saving the $13.1 million, and then we're also saving another $5.4 million with the closure of the 2 schools, we're going to add a few more stops on the one Newark shuttle bus service. So instead of students having to go further out and more students being packed in, we're adding new spots so that the students won't feel like they have to go so far away from home in order to catch the One Newark bus or the One Newark shuttle. So what this is doing is it's saving because we're getting faster traveling time, and it's going to cause less disruption because we'll have less students on the buses. Finally, so we've talked about our students, we've talked about our transportation. Lastly, I want to talk to you about our teachers. Originally, in the old plan, we had our teachers moving, and actually a lot of them lost their jobs. We don't want that to happen. We have great teachers at Newark, and we want to keep these great teachers. So what we're going to do is we are going to have a job fair specifically for those teachers who are being displaced from New Leadership Academy and Fast Track Success Academy. And any district openings that we have in the entire district, they get first choice. Why? Because we put our teachers first. We want to make sure that our teachers understand that we care for them, we love them, we appreciate their service, and that they have done such a good job with our children. We want to move them from where they were to a new place where they would actually like to be. So teachers will get to rank the places where they would like to go, and once they do that, they'll be able to they'll be able to start. Some of them will follow their students. We want to make sure that we continue the good cultures that Fast Track Academy and New Leadership Academy had. So we're hoping that some of the teachers will also follow the students there. With that being said, I just wanted to recap on transportation, students, and teachers. We've gone through this before, but we wanted to make sure that we are focusing on our community and building, not at the expense of our most vulnerable students. Thank you so much for listening to me this evening, and without further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Denver Jean-Baptiste to speak about communication.
Good day, everyone. I am Denver Baptiste, your Chief Family and Community Officer, and I'm going to talk to you guys with my team about how we plan on accommodating everyone and during our closing process. So when we talk about Newark schools in our community, we have to take in the bad sometimes, also with the good. But these are our schools. These are our students. And the community is our community. So, just like every other community, we also face problems. And within our school system, some of the problems that we face is absenteeism, high cost, and low performance rate. So, initiative is being taken to close down specific schools in strategic areas. And while we close down these schools, it is our goal to better accommodate everyone and to help our students succeed. All right? Elementary schools, just like our high schools, are at a high dysfunctional rate in our communities. Our high schools, for example, the high schools that were mentioned by Dr. Barbara and Dr. Siku, that will be closed, they are main priorities right now. But elementary schools also close at alarming rates, also have problems, and these problems are alarming. Some of the problems that we have, for example, is absenteeism, as we mentioned. Elementary schools have a 22% rate throughout the district of students being absent, and that statistic is from 2011-2012 period. The elementary school, like the Speedway Academy, for example, on the city's West Ward, it claims the highest rate of absenteeism, about a 42% rate of students being absent. And nationally, we have a 13% student absenteeism rate in our elementary schools. Now, all of these schools, they're important also, but right now our priority is the high schools because their absenteeism rate is actually higher. So these are the ones that we're considering first to help. Advocacy groups for the children of New Jersey found chronic absenteeism to be disturbing, and it's so high across our district. And that rate of absenteeism, it affects many other components in our community. Now, there are a number of great things that could happen across our schools, but if the child is not present in the classroom, it makes it very difficult for educators to help them to succeed. And coupled with all of that, with the high rate of absenteeism, and we said that additional things that cause burdens in our community is the cost of schools. So we have reduced government funding, right? So with that reduced government funding, it becomes more expensive to accommodate our students at specific schools. Efficiency also in test scores is very low, and the number of students enrolled is also affected, right? But we want to keep our students in the schools, right? We want to get the students there, get them there safely, and keep them in the schools and educate them. So let's look at some things that has been done before to help accommodate these students in the schools. And one of the things that we did, the administration before did, was that principals were required to work with community members and other district employees to reach students that were consistently neglecting or negligent in schools. These students were negligent in schools. So these principals and community members created a personal accountability plan to increase attendance. But what we found in this administration that was counterintuitive to what they did before was that the district laid off 46 attendance counselors. And these attendance counselors at the time were charged with locating students and that were constantly absent, right? And these students that were unaccounted for. And within our administration, we want to create a system of accountability where specific counselors or administrators will work with community members and principals to help find these students and get them in schools and keep them in the schools. Other things that was looked at before, we saw in our district, Mayor Rass teamed up with Superintendent Chief Surf to create an initiative that aimed at bringing a variety of new supports for students at struggling public schools. And $12.5 million was allocated to rescue needy Newark schools. So this money, we have taken portions of this money that is allocated to our administration to provide a variety of support for students in these cities' neediest schools. Right? The initiative has revealed. So we'll create this initiative to support our needy students, and we think it's necessary, even with this money and with our plan, to close the schools mentioned. right? But we will not just close the schools mentioned. We will help, as we said, throughout the transition process. Before, also, one prior to ours was they used an algorithm where the students with the lowest family with the lowest income or disabilities were given top priority in this selection process for specific charter schools. And while this increased the percentage of students that got the schools of their choice, this we found was also highly inefficient in some ways because it didn't accommodate everybody, and students did not have, even throughout with this formula, it didn't have this personal touch of inclusiveness in the decision-making process for all our students. So our main outlook our main goal is to focus on reform and prioritizing the closing, and prioritizing our students and their families as the school close. So our strategy is to improve basically all educational outcomes, and improving educational outcomes means that we look for more of your input, more of the community's input in our decision-making process. So the things that we will do now is to create a more pluralist, or to regard or look at the schools as more of a pluralistic organization. And in this pluralistic organization, our success depends on the communication between the members that are affected and also our administration. So the criteria that we're using to close these schools, as was used before, was based on the high cost, as Dr. Barber mentioned, and also the inefficiency in their test scores. And in addition to that, the number of students that also attend these schools. But coupled with all of that, all of these criteria for closing, we should also include in our standard, right? We should also include more of an involvement with the people that are affected. So you will have a say in how, or the transition process in this closing, in our school closing, in these schools closing. So what we will do now, some of the additional things that we will do now is to inform all persons affected by the possible closure of the schools. We will also have forums where people affected in the community will have input on possible ideas to help with the transition process, right? We'll also get statistics on school closure. We'll do research. In addition, we'll focus on places that the students will go as these schools close. So we'll give them additional academic support because the students are our first priority and the people that are affected. In addition to the forums that we'll have, as Dr. Barber mentioned, we'll implement career placement strategies and support for teachers affected by the closure. So as we have these teachers affected, for example, will get first priority in the schools that they would like to go to or they could get to teach in, or first priority in employment overall. We'll also look at the parents affected or involved. We'll take field trips, if you would like also, as part of initiating the students and providing them with options for potential schools that they might want to attend. We'll have transition programs, a transition team to help people involved with the change in the schools, right? And there should also be a board that promotes this seamless transition. Overall, we are looking for stability within the students that are affected, their family, and in our community. So stability with regards to our community, our staff, the members in our community. We want to do everything that we do. We want to do it in a professional way that respects everybody that is affected, that shows respect to everybody affected. Superintendent Sankofa mentioned in his talk with you guys that the formation of that we'll form new attendance committees that is focused on reversing the attendance trend throughout the city and school system. And he said also the best response to research is action. And this is what we're committed to doing within the weeks and months ahead. And we want to do that with you. Dr. Barbara Boeshe said today that bad news the bad news is that our students in Newark are missing out of thousands of instructional hours, right? And if they miss these thousands of instructional hours, academic success is hindered. So we want to get our students in school. We want to keep them in school and have them come out at with the highest success rates. And their success rates depends on them being in school. So we want to help in that process. Dr. Andrea St. John will speak. Dr. Andrea St. John spoke, and she described Newark students as resilient. Right? We have street violence, she said. And that's yet another reason to keep our students safe. So we want to make this transition as seamless as possible. So our team is interested in getting or accommodating everybody and making this process, this transition process, smooth. I want to remind us all that we cannot do it alone, and it takes a community to foster community. So let's work together in this turbulent time while our schools are closing to accommodate and to help our students succeed. Thank you.
I would like to thank you, parents, students, community leaders, and all stakeholders present here today. I would also like to give another special thanks to the Newark Public School Administration staff, which is Dr. Boachi, Dr. St. John, and Dr. Baptiste, for their transparency and their rationale for the action plan that we have, which is about to take place. The decision to close schools was something hard for us to grapple with, but one thing I want you all to understand is that the team that we have assorted here has constructed a lens that we use to make decisions that are both just, and we do it with ethics as well. We know that there is glaring disparities across the world, across the nation, as well as Newark, New Jersey, regarding Black and brown students. And we were going to make sure that we do everything that is necessary to push forward and make sure that students have things at hand that is conducive for their growth and development, so they can be cultural ambassadors and be able to compete not only with other school districts close to Newark or in the nation, but worldwide. Thank you all for coming. I also wanted to make one note before you all go. Our efforts in changing these schools into community schools is to make sure that they are used specifically to foster the growth and development of the adults as well as students, and those students who may be at risk as well. And like I said, that effort that we're going to be doing is parallel to our social responsibility as educational leaders. Thank you.